Hey, this is Chris, keeping it real, facts over fear. How you doing today? The news continues to get better on the COVID-19 front. Our notes, all data in charts is a 14-day rolling average. The ratio of suspected cases to confirmed cases is an assumed 5-to-1 ratio. Deaths are falling rapidly to under 40 a day. Reported cases have plateaued and are coming down quickly. Just wanted to show you this graph real quick. The red line is what we're interested in because it is the number of cases by date of reporting, and so we can see we are well under 4,000 on a 14-day rolling average, and so that is really, really good news. Notice the steepness of that line. It's kind of matching, so it's when you just look at the graph, you cut it off right there at the 4,000 mark. Look how steep, sharply it rose, and look how steeply it's declining now. That is really good news. Vaccine distribution is improving slightly. We now have 610,000 North Carolinians who have completed the 2-shot series, either the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine. I meant to check and see if the Johnson & Johnson vaccine had been approved yet, and I did not do that. I think if it hasn't been, it's close, but it's kind of hard to judge the Johnson & Johnson vaccine since it's only like 60 to 65% effective. I think if I was going to get vaccinated, I would want something that was in the 90 to 95% range, which is what the first two are. So analysis, most schools are closed again. Analysis, main drivers of this pandemic: social mobility, indoor spaces, and masks providing a false sense of security. We have reached and are now past a peak in regards to cases in this pandemic. Number one, far more confidence in the true number of daily cases, and so, in other words, I believe this 5-to-1 ratio is good and will remain good until the number of vaccinations really starts to take off. And remember, North Carolina has 10.5 million people in it. So we've got 10 million people to vaccinate. That's 20 million doses. That's quite a hill to climb. But that brings up a good point. I don't know how to handle vaccinations in regard to the herd immunity chart. In other words, I wish there was, what I would think I could do would be to take the 610,000, plug it into the number of confirmed cases, because basically a vaccination or a case, a naturally acquired case, has the same result. That once you're over it, well, of course, if you're getting vaccinated, you don't have a chance of dying. But if you get COVID and you get over it, then it's just like getting a vaccine. I've heard some people say that's not quite true. I don't see how that's not true. Otherwise, we would have no natural immunity to anything. But be that as it may. But I don't know how to count. I can't count the vaccinated because I don't know. There's one of two groups that are getting vaccinated that I can't account for. One is the people who have had COVID-19. They know they've had COVID-19, but everybody's telling them to get vaccinated anyway. And by everyone, I mean the government and health authorities. And then there's also the people who did not know they had COVID-19, but they did, and they're going to get vaccinated because even though they didn't have any symptoms. Now, if it were me and I knew I had COVID-19, I would not get a vaccine, if I knew it for a fact. But I don't know that for a fact. And so eventually I will. But you can see that, people who have had COVID-19 and never had any symptoms and so never got tested before are part of this 5-to-1 ratio. So I don't want to double count anybody, but still, I would if I could figure out a way to fairly do it, but I can't. So I'm just going to stick to my original methodology. The new herd immunity date is now 5/21/2021, but has the potential to be much sooner. Well, why? Because even though the number of reported cases is going down, we know the number of vaccinations is going up, and so it just means that we're going to get to this sooner. I mean, we've had 610,000 completed series in 2 months, in just over 2 months. If the vaccine distribution picks up even a little bit, and we get like 1 million each of the next 2 months. See, there's so many unknowns when trying to predict these things. Certainly, as the number of confirmed cases continues to drop, this red line will continue to go in this direction, and therefore push the polynomial regression that describes that data to the right. But on the other hand, we're going to have people who have been vaccinated. I'm just going to have to think this through and try to come up with some kind of reasonable middle ground to try to be as accurate as I can. So at some point, this line is going to be the number of actual cases plus the approximate number of vaccinated cases, or the approximate number of real cases plus the real number of vaccinations. We're going to have to switch over here probably about April 1st. I'll try to do that. I think by then, the number of actual cases on a 14-day rolling average is going to be below 2,000. I mean, look how steeply that is declining right now. And it's only going to get, as more people get vaccinated, it's only going to get steeper. So there you have it, the conundrum that we cannot solve right now. I expect deaths per case to remain about the same, but as the number of cases declines, so will the number of deaths. I believe 40% of North Carolinians have had the virus, which is about 4 million people. If we knew who they were and then could just vaccinate everyone else, we could get out of this thing much more quickly, but we don't. And just another little note, but I've really already covered that. And so we have the chart. You know, if I had just kind of like guess right now, I'm thinking certainly the 1st of May, we will reach herd immunity. That's kind of my feel for it right now. And this line is going to continue to drop rapidly. We should be under 2,000 cases a day, probably by mid-March. That's another month. Deaths per case will probably remain. You would think with the improved medical care that these people are getting that this would be a little bit lower, but yeah, it just seems like it's not. So there seems to be like this. There's this hard floor of, you know, the percentage of deaths per case. It's like, if you know, it's some people. Of course, it is just over 1%, so it's not like it's the end of the world. But you know, to people who have lost people, loved ones and whatnot, it's not really just such an abstract thing. All right, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the section below. Like and subscribe. We appreciate when you do, and we'll see you on the next fact-filled video.